What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Bridging the Gap podcast. My God, we are on a roll, fam. Thank you so much to the people who've listened to my last two podcasts, especially the sex one. Like, that was something different that I really wanted to try, and it paid off. You know, I had over 2,000 downloads in the first day, which is crazy to think that there's over 2,000 people that want to listen to my monotone voice through the medium of podcast in 24 hours. You know, I'm sure that number's up now, which is crazy. So thank you so much to anyone who supports my journey. I hope I can offer you any kind of value that you can take home from this. And today we plan on doing just that. So today we are going to delve into hypertrophy. What? Josh, you're going to talk about muscle building? I thought you didn't talk about that on this channel. Bodybuilding is my life. For those of you guys who just follow the podcast, I am a huge into building muscle. And now this is a lot different from going to the gym. I'm solely training to building muscle and the best way to do that. And there are ways that we can optimize that. And there are ways that we can maximize our potential to gain muscle. So I'm going to run through as many different things as I can think off the top of my head that are going to increase your chances of gaining muscle. So I think this podcast will really hit home with a lot of people. I think the biggest portion of my audience of bodybuilders are people who want to feel good, look good. This advice will be for anyone who is looking to improve their body composition, who is looking to improve the muscle gain they can achieve and improve the fat loss they can gain. We are going to work through in terms of nutritional, physical, mentality, recovery, all that kind of stuff. So first of all, nutritionally, what can you do to set yourself up nutritionally to maximize your potential to gain muscle? Well, everything I'm going to talk about is going to be based off research. If you ever want to hear about the research and the links to the papers, I will be linking them in the podcast notes, which hopefully will be on the podcast app for you. If you're on Spotify, SoundCloud, or anything like that, they should be in the description. If they're not, message me. I will send them to you. So first of all, protein. Protein, we know, is the building blocks of protein synthesis. Muscle protein synthesis being the synthesis of new muscle. So we constantly undergo a balance of muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. Now, muscle protein breakdown needs to happen in order to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. However, if muscle protein breakdown increases more than muscle protein synthesis, we then turn into muscle loss. This is where, when we're in a big long cut, trying to lose a lot of body weight, actually muscle protein breakdown elevates a little bit higher than muscle protein synthesis would, which is why it's easier to lose muscle during a deficit. In opposition to that, maximizing muscle protein synthesis and being able to increase that as much as possible can actually be done nutritionally. And the way we do that is, of course, through protein, because protein is the building blocks. So regular servings of protein, anywhere from around 20, I would say maybe 20, 25 grams of a highly bioavailable protein with a full amino acid complex. That is a mouthful for you. So we know their amino acids make up protein. However, in something like a BCAA, branched chain amino acids, you are missing EAAs, which are the essential amino acids. However, most, I'm going to generalize this to kind of animal-based products that have protein in it, you know, so meat, dairy, eggs, anything like that. Most of those, if not all of those, have a full amino acid complex. So that is where you'd want to be getting your 20 to 30 grams of protein from. Why do we want 20 to 30 grams and not, say, 10 or anything like that? The reason is because we want to aim to get around 2 grams of leucine per protein serving. Now, leucine, we know, plays a vital role in muscle protein synthesis, being one of the most essential amino acids, but not all of the essential amino acids. So if you can, you want to be aiming for a minimum of 2 grams of leucine per protein serving every 3 to 4 hours. Why every 3 to 4 hours? We know that full digestion of a meal is roughly going to take about 4 hours, depending where you are. Obviously, if you're in a cut, you're going to digest a little bit quicker, just because you need nutrients faster. If you're in a big off season, that's going to be a little bit slower. So waiting for the full gastric system to empty of protein, carbs, fats before you eat again can help stimulate muscle protein synthesis at regular intervals during the day. So to cap on protein, you want to be eating anywhere from 2 to 2.25 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So for example, you're 100 kilos, you'd be at 225 at the top range. Your minimum effective dose would be 2. So for me, I'm about 100 kilos. I eat 200 grams because I'm on a minimum effective dose right now, so I can maximize my carbohydrates in this cutting phase. So just stick between 2 and 2.25. You're going to have absolutely no worries fluctuating between then. Break up your protein servings into regular protein servings, maybe 4 or 5 a day. I wouldn't worry if you miss a window. It's not going to be the be all and end all. This is marginal gains we are talking about. The most important thing is going to be the calories over the day and the protein servings over the day. We do know that there is a limit to protein absorption. This is all going to be based off body weight, current goals. You know, for example, I'm going to assimilate a lot more protein than, say, someone in the off season who's got an abundance of protein. You know, my body needs every fucking molecule that I've got, so it's going to assimilate more of it because I'm in a deficit versus someone in off season. But roughly speaking, you won't need to go above 50 to 60 grams. Probably I'd put 60 grams as like the max that you'd need. And like someone who's fucking massive, we're talking like 6'4" giant, could probably push to 70, but there's no need to go above like 60, 70 grams of protein per meal. So if you can actually just split that up, that would be ideal. So maybe four servings of 60 grams to take you to 240 grams, you know, and or 4 servings of 50 to take you to 200 grams, whatever you need to do. So that's protein. Protein serves a two-way mechanism as well. It's the most satiating of all macronutrients, so it's essentially going to keep you fuller for longer, hunger-wise, hormone-wise. It's also the most thermodynamically demanding, so it takes the most energy to break up, which is something cool to note. So something I do actually in a reverse diet when people are coming out of a contest prep, because their hunger is so high, I actually just bump their protein up like 40 grams or something, you know, so they are satiated way more, but without overloading carbohydrates and stuff that they might be sensitive to. So that's protein. Pretty simple. Regular protein servings of I would say 30 to 50 grams, depending on your size, getting a full amino acid complex. So that's a highly bioavailable protein, like an animal protein. For any of you vegans or vegetarians out there, that would be like a mixture of rice and beans, quinoa, or quinoa, as I say. People are going to shoot me for that. But you can literally just Google full amino acid complex proteins, vegan, sorted. Even for the same for non-vegans, you know, if you can't find if you want a different source of protein, then just Google that and it'd be absolutely sorted. That's pretty much it in terms of protein. We don't need to go into too much depth of all this kind of stuff. I just want to give an overview of what I think you can maximize. Fats. Again, this is going to be very macronutrient depending. You got to take into consideration your whole caloric goal, and what your goal is. Obviously, if you're trying to gain muscle and you're in an off season, fats can be pretty flexible. They can come up pretty high because you've got sufficient carbohydrates. However, if you're in a cutting phase, you probably would look to minimize fats just to prioritize carbohydrates. So you would put your fats down to a minimum effective dose. So I actually wouldn't go below 40 grams of protein for anyone, and that would be someone who's pretty fucking small. Most people I won't take below 50. Like on a day at all, really, especially natural people. We know that cholesterol makes up huge amounts of our hormones. So if we were to cut away fat and cholesterol, you just would have no basis for hormones, which is actually why in a competition prep phase, and you've got to dwindle fats, your sex drive goes down, your hormones come down. It's one of the factors that will drive testosterone down. So having like a good essential fatty acid complex across your day is very, very good. I recommend things like olive oil, olives, hummus, avocados, dark chocolate, you know, things like that, poly and monounsaturated, to maximize your amounts of different fats that you're getting in, because different fats contain different micronutrients equals a better range of health, essentially, because we're all depleted in micronutrients most of the time. 2 seconds, I'm going to sip my Nocco, which is my caffeine beverage for the day. I've got passion fruit, Definitely not as nice as a Monster. I always find knockers are quite dry, if that makes sense. Where was I? Fats. So, I like to split my days, rest day and training days. Training days, we know we have a higher glycogen demand, so I would put my carbohydrates higher on that day, which means I would put my fats higher on my rest days to bring my average fat for the week up. So make sure you're at least hitting your minimum effective dose of fat for hormones, for skin, and also the micronutrition that you're getting in fatty acids proves invaluable. So definitely stick to that minimum and then actually try to get above that in an off season. But there's not too much to say that fat is going to help us towards hypertrophy. It's just something that's good for health, really. So in terms of fat and hypertrophy, I wouldn't say there's a correlation, really. Not a huge one. There's definitely some things that will affect it, but I would say protein and carbohydrates would be prioritized. So moving on to carbohydrates. So we know that there's a pretty decent research actually into carbohydrates and post-workout carbohydrates. GLUT4, which is like a glucotransporter, which is essentially elevated post-workout. GLUT4, GULT4, Google it. It summarizes pretty easy on Google these days, because that's elevated post-workout along with the stimulation of mTOR. Actually, we know that having a big hefty dose of carbohydrates is going to be pretty anabolic for you. It's also a position where you're in demand for nutrients, and if you're providing those nutrients, you're going to help with the recovery and assimilation and transportation of those nutrients to where need it the quickest, which is why we tend to have like a faster absorbing, higher insulinogenic type post-workout meal. So whey is pretty insulinogenic. It's going to be emptied from your gastro system pretty quickly. The same thing with you see bodybuilders having like cereal or bagels and jam post workout. It's because it's just easy to absorb, and it's pretty light on the stomach. Other than that, carbohydrates pre-workout as well. Get a pretty good hefty dose of pre-workout carbohydrates. We know that carbohydrates are the most readily available source of energy, especially when we're working like we are in the gym anaerobically, or without the use of oxygen. We need ATP, creatine phosphate, and it kind of goes through those energy systems. But a big driver of that is glucose and glycogen. And working as we are as muscle builders, we know that the glycogen is going to be the best source of energy that we have. That doesn't say that keto doesn't work. I just think for bodybuilding, glycogen and carbohydrates are much better. And the rest of your carbohydrates can pretty much float around the day as it is. Again, it depends on your macronutrient target, what your carbohydrates go to. If you're dwindling, then you've got to just prioritize your carbohydrates around that workout window to maximize your ability to recover and perform. Because performance and your ability in the gym to perform at a high standard is essentially what's going to drive tissue on, but also keep tissue there when you're in a deficit. So in terms of working carbohydrates around that, we call it peri-workout nutrition, so pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition. We talked about pre, we talked about post. So intra-workout nutrition, you'd actually, like the best port of call for me is to mix highly branched cyclodextrin and EAAs. So there is good research, and I'll also put this in the show notes, into intra-workout recovery and essentially the science is we go through pretty much muscle protein breakdown when we train. That is, we cannot stop that. We are catabolic when we train. We are breaking down muscle. That is muscle protein breakdown. Obviously, we are trying to mitigate some of that muscle protein breakdown with muscle protein synthesis, and actually studies show, I think the study took about 175 people between the ages of 18 and 28. So pretty much the listeners of this show age, but you could probably apply it to a full population. It was a pretty good study. They basically tested people through a workout with a placebo drink, one with the intra EAAs and carb drink. And they found that muscle protein breakdown reduced pretty significantly, actually, in the people the intro workout drink. Does it mean it's going to make you gain a load of muscle? Probably not. Does it mean it's going to mitigate some muscle protein breakdown? Probably. So we actually know that it's going to help, and that's another marginal gain in my book. So a mixture of highly balanced cyclodextrin and EAAs is your best bet. For EAAs, there are pretty shitty quality EAAs on the market these days, so just be careful with where you buy. I recommend Insight Supplements. Would you believe it? I'm sponsored by them. Josh 10 gets you discount across all of them. I'm lucky in the fact that with my sponsor, they don't just stock one. It's not Insight as a brand. They stock 30, 40 brands, so I'm supporting 30, 40 brands, which is what I always wanted. There's no way that I could support a supplement company on their own, because what makes your product better than these people? Why should I tell my friends, my family, my Instagram fans, or whatever you want to call them, supporters, why should they buy your creatine, which is £20 more than my protein? Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't into that. So I'm very, very fortunate in that fact, that you could probably get a pretty decent EAA off there. Highly balanced cyclodextrin. So the reason why I would choose highly balanced cyclodextrin over a glucose or dextrose is just because of the molecular weight. So it has a high molecular weight with a low osmolarity, which essentially just promotes gastric emptying. So in layman's terms, in English, it essentially, you drink it and it passes through the lining of the gut really, really easily. Almost no bloat, no blood needs to rush to the area, no enzymes, no upregulation of stomach acid needs to happen, which is perfect because we're training. We're not fucking digesting, right? This is what I say to people who fucking take a banana and shake and they think it's going to help them in their workout. I think, no, now your body's digesting. Like the substance, the molecule size of a banana and whey compared to like highly balanced cyclodextrin is so large that highly balanced cyclodextrin is almost, you just don't notice it. So that's definitely something I would look into for you guys if you're looking to optimize everything in terms of muscle building, and balancing that muscle protein synthesis and balancing that muscle protein breakdown. I think that's pretty much it in terms of like macronutrition, but micronutrition is just as important in my opinion. Getting enough vegetables, getting enough fiber, and focusing on your gut health, because if you're not focusing on your gut health, you've got indigestion, you've got diarrhea, you're farting a lot. It's not normal. That's not a normal thing to do. I've talked a little bit about digestion across my social media platforms, and it's just not normal for that shit to happen. So if you think it is, I was that guy. I thought it was, when I was slamming half a kilo of mince in a bolognese and I'd get farts all night. I used to wonder why. It's because of the protein. It's because of the digestion issues. I just ignored it and carried on. So having optimal digestion, eating foods that help you, eating nature's toilet brush, which is fiber, make sure you have a lot of vegetables in terms of different textures, different, some leaves, some crunchy, some super crunchy, some cruciferous, some dark, some light, some red, as many different colors, as many different textures, as many different tastes as you can to enhance your micronutrition levels. To get the recommended daily allowance of what a multivitamin can do, you got to eat a fuckload of vegetables. So I suggest you eat the vegetables 100%. And just make sure you are having anywhere from 10 to 15 servings a day. Seems to be pretty good in terms of research. And anything above is bonus. So if you can do above, great. But just consider it into your caloric intake for the day, for the week, and you'll be absolutely fine. The same thing with fruit. Like, fruit is amazing antioxidants in there, in berries and stuff. If you're not doing that, you're kind of inhibiting your detoxification of your body. Of inflammation, build up of lactic acid, anything like that. Fruits are going to fucking help. The first thing people say is, oh, where's my anti-inflammatory? Where's my NSAID? Non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs. No, just fucking look at your diet. Have a fuckload of berries. That's a really good antioxidant. So make sure you're covering your micronutrition. Make sure you're covering your fiber intake and your vegetable intake. Make sure you're monitoring your protein. Make sure you're balancing your carbohydrates and fats, and you're going to be in a very good place in terms of muscle building. Sip time. So let's move on to the physical side, what everyone wants to hear about, and it's about the training and everything like that. So when we consider training, we have to consider mechanisms of hypertrophy, right? And the main things that right now we look at is mechanical tension, muscle damage, metabolic stress, and these can all play a role in exercise-induced muscle growth. Therefore, in my opinion, we would be stupid to miss one of these, if that makes sense. So we need to mechanically load, we need to focus on mechanical tension, but then we also need to focus on a metabolite stress. And then I think briefly just kind of going into those, we can consider mechanical tension essential for muscle growth. We consider that metabolic stress has speculated that accumulation of metabolites may be important for optimizing a hypertrophic response to training. And then muscle damage is theorized to generate a hypertrophic response. So you can kind of take what you want from that, which is kind of where we would put a lot of our emphasis on mechanical tension, which is essentially just getting strong as fuck under really, really good tension. This is why we control our eccentric and concentric so much. When you look at like a bicep curl, for example, you've got two portions of that movement. The concentric, obviously when you're pausing and stuff, you can consider an isometric, but when you're contracting that bicep curl up, you could consider that the concentric, and then when you come back down and elongate that bicep, you can consider that the eccentric. And we know that during the eccentric portion of the movement, so the lengthening of phase, you cause like a pretty decent amount of hypertrophic damage, or damage that would induce hypertrophy, for a little bit less like fatigue to the body. So if you can ever think of those times when you did like bench press to failure or whatever, there was always times when your body could lift it up first and you could let it come down slowly still. It's because essentially you don't cause as much damage there, but you don't cause as much fatigue there, but cause a lot of damage. So it makes sense for us to just maximize our time under tension with just mechanical load, and really just push that barrier there in terms of form being 3 seconds down, to spend more time in that muscle damage area and that muscle fiber specific area of the movement, and really just capitalize on that. So what does that mean? That means if you're doing 1 rep maxes, you're going to feel absolutely fucked but get less hypertrophic response from that. So that means that we should spend way more time in the eccentric phase, because there's more damage done with less fatigue. So spend time in that eccentric, control every fucking weight, 1, 2, 3, press, and be disciplined. Be disciplined in doing that, and be relentless with it until your final rep. So that's kind of attention covered, alongside putting that into like a nice isolation movement. Then we talk about mechanical tension. Now that is just pure load. How much brute force can you put into a session? And this is where you would look at your big compound movements, your bread and butter movements. Your RDLs, your hack squats, your pendulum squats, your bench presses, your bent over rows, and those kind of things. That would be your mechanical tension. That would be all out load. You'd still focus on your time under tension, but you'd be focusing on just moving that fucking weight and mechanically getting strong as hell and putting some mechanic stress through your body, and progressing that over the weeks. So that's where I'd go second in my workout. For third, metabolite training. This is just your pump shit. Everyone loves to get a good pump. Go fucking get a good pump, because there's a reason for it. There's a reason why people say, oh, the pump feels good, the pump is making me gain muscle, because it does. Cell swelling is a real thing. You can really just actually trains your vasculature as well, pumping a load of blood into the veins, and arteries and capillaries, and then actually letting that come back out. So you train your vasculature, number 1. Number 2, just blood volume seems to increase hypertrophy in the area. So it seems, and because of if you were to do that metabolite stress at the beginning and you go in with a pump, you're not going to be able to efficiently load like you would be able to if you move that mechanical stress element earlier, right? So you've got to consider that when you look at your mechanisms of hypertrophy. So in terms of like a set, if you were to categorize that set between 1 and 10, 10 being you cannot physically move that weight anymore, we know there's a minimum that you need to be, and that minimum is about 7. You get a hypertrophic response below 7, but it's massively diminished returns. So you do 1 rep, which is 9 reps and failure, 2 reps, which is 8 reps and failure. You get me? For up to 3, 4, 5, you start to get some stimulus. 6, you get a little bit of hypertrophic response. As soon as you start to get to 7, 8, 9, 10, that exponentially increases. And once you hit 10, you're getting the most amount of hypertrophic response possible. However, there is a flip side to that. While you're training at 10 out of 10, inevitably your overall training sets have to come down, because there's no way you can go to 10 out of 10 for 4, 5, 6 sets on each exercise. It's not possible. If you can do that, you're superhuman. There's no way you're doing that. And if you were to do that, guess what? Your recovery is compromised. So the people who tend to train between 7, 8, 9, over a mesocycle, they don't. I wouldn't say they need to focus less on recovery. They just probably don't need to recover as well as someone who's working at 10. And that is often the argument, is that you cannot recover it. You cannot recover efficiently enough to put enough volume in if you're training at a 10 out of 10, which is not true, because I've been doing it for 2-3 years now, and I've recovered very, very well. And there's thousands of bodybuilders that are doing it, and they happen to be the biggest ones. Don't know if there's a correlation there, but I'm just saying. But here's my problem with RPE training. So RPE is rate of perceived exertion, which is essentially that 1 to 10 scale I just talked about. So if you work off an RPE 7, which is where we want the minimum to be, for me, like, that 7 changes day to day. The days you wake up, you feel heavy. The days you wake up, you feel tired. The days you wake up and feel fantastic. That 7 is inevitably going to be different, So if you go in and you're programmed sets of squats at 4 sets of 8 reps at RPE 7, which is pretty realistic because you do more sets because the intensity is down, that 7 might be different, So maybe that 7 is 100 kilos one day. Maybe when you feel great, that 7's 110. So I find that difficult to kind of adhere to in that way. Also, another problem I have with RPE training is that it doesn't suit my personality. Now, this is something that I definitely use RPE training for some of my clients, because they're not someone who wants to go balls to the wall. They just want to sit nicely below that threshold and make consistent gains, because it's still possible. Both of them work. But I find with bodybuilders, I find with people who like to push themselves, that actually that intense low volume workout really, really helps mentally, because you're just fucking going for it and putting it all on the table with no excuses. And I love that. I love that feeling of leaving nothing left and knowing I got to come in next week and beat it. So it's pretty savage. In terms of like deciding between RPE and training to failure, I think a big consideration would be training age. I would 100% start with RPE training, because a huge portion of bodybuilding is skill acquisition, and you probably need to spend a year, 2 years learning these skills and making them second to none, making them effortless, making them subconscious. So you want to be focusing on lots of frequency, probably not too much failure, but just doing things a lot, and doing things frequently. So if you're below 3 years in training age, I would say you could do this across a full body workout, an upper lower and a push pull legs, and just build up your volume over like a 8 to 12 week period. Take a deload and then just repeat, and then as you get further and further down that training age, and it gets harder and harder to reach that hypertrophic response that you need, you're then going to have to creep up that RPE scale. And for me, I personally think that if you're a highly trained individual, an advanced trainer, I think you're getting the most bang for your buck out of the 10 out of 10 work, maybe a few 9 out of 10 works, with just recovering very, very well. It just allows that mechanical tension part to shoot straight up, along with everything else, to be honest. I think that's a pretty good summary of how I think about training. You need to just be balancing your volume with intensity the whole time, So if you go through periods of lower intensity, the sets need to come up a little bit. If you go through periods of high intensity, the sets need to come down a little bit. But the most important thing is progressive overload. Are you progressively overloading? Are you getting stronger each week? Are you getting stronger across your metabolite? Are you getting stronger across every aspect of hypertrophy? Are you increasing your metabolite work, pushing more metabolites in there over time? Because you will inevitably, if you're doing the same metabolite work every single time, guess what? You get used to it. Your body adapts. We're trying to force adaptation here. In order to force adaptation, you need to change something. It needs to be harder than the week before. This is where counting volume comes in. So essentially, volume is pretty easy to count. You just count the weight times sets times reps. You know, so if you got 100, you do it one time, you do it for one set, that's 100 kilos of volume. You know, the next time you need to do 105 kilos of volume. I download the app Rep Count. I use the app Rep Count to track everything in terms of volume. It literally, I pay like $5.99 for it for one-time use, and you get your volume there, and you can just see you need to push the volume up. You know, and I think in coinciding with that progressive overload is tracking your fucking lifts. If you do not track your lifts now, track your lifts and watch yourself grow. You know, stick to your 3 or 4 sets or your 2 sets, whatever you're doing. Pick your intensities, pick your RPEs, pick your volumes, and just stick to it and just watch those numbers go up and up and up and start chasing it down. If you find that you're not able to get increased weight, increase strength each week, and you're trying to go for a higher intensity work, then decrease your volume. I've been to the point where I've done 6 sets on chest a week, you know, because I've not been able to recover from the intensity, you know, and then you just build that up over time. Try 7 sets, try 8 sets. Are you still recovering? Are you still progressing? Yes, cool. Keep going. Have you stopped progressing? Cool. That's your maximum recoverable volume, you know. And just balancing it like that, dudes and dudettes, is a really, really cool way to balance your training. So if you've ever got any questions about training, let me know, and I will definitely get back to you across those. Moving into the final thing that I want to talk about in terms of maximizing your potential to build muscle is going to be recovery. You can only train as hard as you can recover. In order to recover hard, you need to be training smart, you need to be nutritionally smart, but there are things that you can do in terms of direct recovery work. The mother is going to be sleep. Do you consider your sleep hygiene? If not, go watch one of my videos about sleep hygiene. I talk about this so much. Having less than 7 hours sleep a night can increase your risk of all-cause mortality. Sleeping less has been linked to diabetes, it's been linked to dementia. It's also been linked to Alzheimer's. You know, the less you sleep, the less you process your memories, the more forgetful you're going to get. Sleep is everything. Sleep can help regulate your blood glucose, it can help regulate your cortisol, it can help regulate your overall hormones. If you're not sleeping, you are killing yourself. Did you know, and I'm sorry to say this because I've got a few clients that do this, but anyone who works shift work, night work has now been considered a carcinogen because of the cancerous effect it might have on the circadian rhythm and on the body. So depending what position you're in, I would do everything you can to get away from that, because working a night shift is the same as smoking cigarettes. So if you don't smoke cigarettes and you work a night shift, that's a bastard. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that is how it's been classified. So if you can get away from night shift work, get away from it as soon as you can. I know it's higher priced money, but can you put price on your health? And you work shift work all your life, you know, you're probably going to find you're going to have some problems. So sleep, guys, focus on your sleep, get into a good routine, you know, focus on getting some nice natural blue light in the day, circadian rhythm, ground yourself. Wear some blue light blockers in the evening to block out any blue lights from electronics. This will help melatonin release. Maybe some 5-HTP before bed to help serotonin release. There's so many things that you can consider during sleep, and I've got a full video on it, so check over to my YouTube channel, Josh Bridgman Fitness. You can actually just type in Josh Bridgman Sleep. I've got 2 videos on it. It should be the top 2 that come up on YouTube. So check those out, and let me know what you think. You can also stretch, foam roll, baths, salt baths, anything that's going to relax you and promote a parasympathetic nervous system state. So we have an autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic being our fight or flight, our adrenaline release when we're fighting, when we're training, when we're doing a triathlon, when we're stressed, that is sympathetic. When we are calm, we're digesting, we're sat down, we're relaxed, that is parasympathetic. We essentially want to be parasympathetic as much as you can, apart from when you train, of course. So meditation, relax, do some deep breathing. I've just downloaded the app Headspace. I'm on a 5-day streak as we talk. I'm going to do another 10 minutes after this. But it helps me it reduces my blood pressure. So I took my blood pressure before meditation and after. It went from 140 over 75, I'm on steroids, relax, to 120 over 65 from just 10 minutes of breathing. My heart rate dropped from 63 to 53 in 10 minutes as well. So generally, guys, meditation will have a positive effect on your physical and emotional well-being. And I highly recommend you trying it. I'm still getting used to it. I'm not very good at it. I definitely need some work still. It's very hard to keep, because meditation is not necessarily about thinking about things. It's about not thinking about anything and just letting whatever happens happen. So it's a bit confusing. It's a bit hard, but I'm getting used to it. I'm working my way through a foundational course as we speak. So yeah, 2 seconds, another drink. Yeah, and then in terms of recovery, there are supplements. However, I'm not going to talk about supplements today because I think there's so much that we miss in terms of fundamentals. There's so many. I'm trying to think what the term is. There's just so many options that we can take before you need to start taking supplements. And actually, supplements might just mask a problem. Yeah, you can take a sleep tablet that helps you get to sleep, like melatonin, but will you rely on that? Why are you not producing melatonin naturally? These are things you need to look into. These are lifestyle things you need to look into. So I would 100% recommend taking into consideration all of these things I've talked about in terms of nutrition, training, physical recovery, even mental, guys, like your support system. How relaxed are you? Are you coming back to a girlfriend or boyfriend who you constantly argue with? Are you coming back to a parent you constantly argue with? Why are you arguing with them? Why are you stressed? Are you at a job that you hate? Are you doing, all of these things will inhibit your ability to gain muscle. If you're in a job which you don't want to wake up to and you have to go there, your cortisol rises from stress. You then hold water. You then get a cortisol dump about midday where you feel tired, and then you've got to do your full day's work, and then you've got to go train. But if you've got a job where you're bouncing to get out of bed for, you don't have these stressor response. So just being able to manage your stress responses, things that just give you stress. And by stress, I don't mean, oh my God, I'm stressed, I need to do this, I need to do that. I just mean things that will take you away from homeostasis, things that will take you away from baseline. That means cardio. Cardio is a stress. It doesn't mean it's a negative stress. It's just a stress. The body receives a stress and we adapt to those stresses. However, if you are constantly stressed all day, you are sympathetic all day. You wake up, you do cardio, you have your coffee, which is actually drives you to be sympathetic. You're in meetings all day, so you're constantly worried about this, that, this. You're planning all day, you're working all day. This is just sympathetic. And you don't get time to be able to switch off and calm down and bring things back to baseline ever. So that is my biggest tip, is going to be just take time a day, in the day, to just relax 10, 15 minutes and just promote yourself to be in that parasympathetic state. Meditation is my favorite. Literally, there are 5-minute things on Headspace and it's free for the first 10 sessions. So just try it, 5 minutes. That's all you need to do. So the first question is about reverse dieting, how to reverse diet. So for those of you guys that don't know, reverse dieting is essentially what happens after you diet. So you reverse it, who would have thought? Here is my reverse diet protocol for most people. In fact, I'll talk you through my client Aaron Biddle's reverse diet, as he is a very, very good example. So we dieted for 12 weeks. We probably lost about 10, 11 kilos. Cardio got up to 5 days per week. Food was probably down towards 2,400 calories. And he wanted to reverse diet about 3-4 weeks before his holiday, so that he was in a good place metabolically to go away on holiday. Because obviously, if you just stop your diet and you just start eating shit, you're going to gain fat. But we don't want to do that, so we wanted to build his metabolism up. So the first thing that I would do is, depending how much cardio you're on, I'm going to take this as though you're doing a lot of cardio, you're not eating much food. Half the cardio, straight up. Keep the heart rate there, keep the intensity there of the cardio, but just half it straight away. Cardio is inevitably catabolic. We are now trying to be anabolic. We're trying to reduce muscle protein breakdown. So reducing cardio helps in that. I would then just drip feed food in very, very easily. Depending where your fats are, if they're below where I would want them to be, I would bring those immediately up. But actually, Aaron was in a pretty good place. So we just added carbs in. I added about 50 carbs in straight away. That's 200 calories a day. That's 1,400 calories a week. He then lost weight. Why did he lose weight? Because he had more energy available to train, which increased his output, which increased his deficit. So actually, the first 4 to 6 weeks of a reverse diet, you're still in a deficit, but you're eating more food because your output goes up. And because you're so sensitive to food, you feel every fucking molecule that comes in, and you just feel incredible. And Aaron does feel incredible. And he is now eating in 3 weeks of I think it's been 2 weeks, to be honest. In 2 weeks of reverse dieting, he is now eating just above what he started his cut on. So you can appreciate how fast you metabolically react. So I would check in every 3 days. I would drip feed 25 carb in every 3 days until your weight gets pretty stable. That would be then your new maintenance level. Your maintenance should be pretty decent after a cut as well, because you're just a fucking furnace. I'd then stay at maintenance for a while, and then I'd start your off season. 100%. That'd be it. Very, very easy for a reverse diet. You obviously want to monitor your recovery, your fatigue, your sleep, and all that kind of stuff, because after a dieting phase, it tends to be that you need a deload. Like Aaron needs a deload, but he's going away in 2 weeks, so he's just going to hang on for 2 weeks and deload while he's there. Probably the smartest thing to do. So you need to consider those things when you are taking that into consideration. How do you know whether you are recovering from your current training volume? So there's a few questions that you need to ask. Essentially, are you progressing? If you're progressing, you're recovering, in my opinion. If you're performing at the same intensity, for me, failure. So it's pretty easy to monitor progression. The same sets in the same rep ranges, and you're still progressing, you're recovering. So maybe try and add a few sets on here and there. If you still continue to progress and you still continue to progress across everything in terms of your metabolic training, your time under tension training, and everything remains exactly the same, which is why we standardize form at the beginning, then you're still good. You know, it's when you start to not recover and maybe you don't sleep as well, we call that overreaching, and you're kind of doing a bit too much and you're burning out, you just back off the volume, and that would be your key thing. So the main thing is how you feel. Then you've got a few biomarkers that you can track. Your HRV, so your HRV will skew. Obviously, your heart rate variability can indicate fatigue. So essentially, when that starts to skew, you can see if you're getting fatigued or not. Heart rate can go up a little bit, blood pressure can go up a little bit if you're doing too much. So just monitor those things as well, and just make a good decision from there. In terms of the next question, where and how to get knowledge? Well, my friend, if you're listening to this, you are doing it. This is my favorite medium to learn, is podcast, because people can sit there and explain, have conversations. I tend to enjoy the podcast where there's more than one person talking. So I appreciate you guys for standing in for one, because there's a good conversation. People ask questions. My go-to podcasts for you guys are the Muscle Mentors, the Muscle Intelligence podcast by Ben Pakulski, Ben Greenfield Fitness for everything biohacking, Mind Pump for everything lifestyle, social, and bodybuilding. They are great, well thought people. And those are pretty much the only ones. For natural bodybuilders, AJ Morris, the Natty Scene, Team MBM podcast. And then otherwise, Revive Stronger is another one. Jeff Nippard is also another one. Those are the bodybuilding ones. And I listen to the odd lifestyle ones by like Lewis Howes and people like that. So podcasts are my number one. YouTube videos, you got to be a little bit careful with the information you find. And then Instagram is crazy these days. The stories people put up, the posts people put up, they're awesome. So I would definitely recommend following some of those people on Instagram as well. And then PubMed, literally just Google, I heard this guy said that fasted cardio doesn't work. Go on PubMed, type in fasted cardio, you will literally get a metadata analysis and you'll find the answer. So yeah, I think those are pretty good guys to follow, and that's where we go from there, dude. So in terms of the final questions, I'm going to use this as the final question because this has been a long one, I believe. Weirdly, when I record these podcasts, the thing I record these through doesn't actually tell me the time. It just gives me 1313 bar on GarageBand. I don't even know what that means. The final question is not going to be bodybuilding related. It's going to be about dissertation tips, and what did you do yours on? So I did my dissertation on the legalization of cannabis in the UK. Yeah, we're shocked, Josh. We're shocked. So tips: fucking start early. Start way, way earlier than you think you need to, because I tried to do it in 4 weeks and fucked it up. Talk to your dissertation supervisor. I didn't go to one meeting and I got marked down heavily for that, which is very, very annoying. I actually got 40%, which means that I probably got like 37 or something, and they just rounded me up to pass me, which is fucking savage. Do you want to know why? Because I cheated. I exactly copied someone's almost word for word. I changed it so it sounded a bit better. There was also more research out because it was 2 years before I did it. So I added more stuff in and I got 40%. This guy got 77%. And I just think, fuck you. But it was probably because I didn't go see my supervisor. I was livid, but I couldn't just storm in there and be like, mate, I just fucking copied someone. How can you mark me down? So don't do as I do as I say. Start early, talk to your supervisor, really get in with your supervisor and talk very, very frequently with them so he can give you ideas. They're supervisors for a reason. Exhaust them. You pay for uni, fucking make that motherfucker pay, One thing is I realize how much debt I have from uni and how much I got to start paying off, and they're going to take away from my wage that I earn. I got fuck all from the lecturers at uni. I think it might have just been mine. I've heard people have good experience at uni with lecturers, but for me, like, I didn't get anything out of them, and they didn't support a student like me who dealt with anxiety and fucking being scared of just being in public and shit. I had some weird uni times, but that's a story for another day. Maybe the next one I can talk about my anxiety at uni. So guys, thank you very much for tuning into the podcast. That is the episode done and dusted. All aspects of hypertrophy, the things that you can do to gain muscle and put yourself in the best position possible. There's plenty more things that you can do. Those are just the main ones that I want you to take home. Marginal gains are everything in this sport. If you're trying to find them, use them. They will change the game. Thank you guys for stopping by. I hope you guys have enjoyed the content recently. I've enjoyed thoroughly making it. It's just emotional to think this fucking country boy with, I've just lived with my mum all my life. My dad left early, and I just think, fuck me, people actually come in and tune into this shit. It's mad. It makes me want to well up a little bit. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Don't forget to drop a like, drop a review on the podcast if you can, and we will speak very, very soon, family. See you soon. Bye-bye. Peace.